April of 1858, Harriet was introduced to John Brown, an abolitionist who advocated the use of violence to overcome slavery. Though she never condoned the use of violence, Harriet sought to achieve the same goals, and they began planning an attack on slaveholders. General Tubman, as Brown called her, recruited both freed and fugitive slaves to their cause, while he made the tactical preparations for the ill-fated raid on Harper's Ferry. In October of 1859, Harriet could not be contacted. Brown went ahead with the raid alone, but was quickly overcome by local militia. He was swiftly arrested, convicted of treason, and hanged by December. The raid served as an important catalyst for the American Civil War. Earlier that year, Harriet had bought some land in Auburn, New York from the Republican senator and abolitionist William H. Seward. She promptly installed her elderly parents there, who were ill-suited to the harsh Canadian winters. The land soon became a haven for the rest of Harriet's family, and for years provided a safe house for fugitives headed north. In November of 1860, Harriet made her last rescue mission to Maryland to retrieve one of her sisters and her 2 children. Upon arriving, she discovered her sister had died and the 2 children could only be freed with a $30 bribe. With no money, Harriet had no choice but to leave them behind. Refusing to waste the expedition, she gathered another group of slaves willing to risk the journey north. The group encountered many slave catchers, forcing them to hide out much longer than anticipated. In extremely cold weather and with little food, the children had to be drugged with paregoric, an opium solution, to keep them quiet around the slave patrols. In 1861, with the outbreak of the American Civil War, Harriet saw a Union victory as the only way to further the abolition cause. She and a group of fellow activists headed to Port Royal, South Carolina, where she initially served as a nurse in the Union camps. When President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, Harriet offered her services as a scout. Her knowledge of covert travel and subterfuge around potential enemies was invaluable, and along with a group of fellow scouts, she mapped the unfamiliar terrain of the marshes and rivers in South Carolina. Later that year, Harriet became the first woman in American history to lead an armed assault in the notorious Combahee River Raid. She guided 3 steamboats carrying 300 Union soldiers through 25 miles of Confederate naval mines, burning plantations and liberating 750 slaves in one night. Harriet dedicated 2 more years of service to the Union forces until the surrender of the Confederacy in 1865, when she returned home to Auburn. During the train ride home, the conductor told her to move to the smoking car. When she refused and tried to explain her government service, he grabbed her and manhandled her out of the car, breaking her arm in the process. Despite her years of service, Harriet was never paid a regular salary and was denied any form of compensation for years. She did not receive a pension for her service in the Civil War until 1899, and her tireless generosity towards her family and former slaves meant she was in a constant state of poverty. At her home in Auburn, Harriet took in a Civil War veteran named Nelson Davis. Despite being 22 years her junior, in 1869 the two were married, and in 1874 they adopted a daughter named Getty. To alleviate her financial situation, Harriet authorized 2 biographies to be written by Sarah Hopkins Bradford, the first of which, Scenes in the Life of Harriet Tubman, earned her some $1,200 in revenue. In a further bid to reduce her growing debts, Harriet fell victim to a gold swindle in 1873. 2 men, claiming to be family acquaintances, approached Harriet and claimed to have a $5,000 stash of Confederate gold, smuggled from South Carolina. They offered to sell it to her for $2,000, which she borrowed from a wealthy friend. When she went to meet the 2 men alone at night, they subdued her with chloroform, tied her up, and stole her money. In later years, Harriet worked closely with women's rights advocate Susan B. Anthony to promote the cause of women's suffrage. She began attending suffragist meetings, describing her actions during the Civil War and speaking out in favour of women's voting rights. In 1897, a suffragist newspaper hosted a series of receptions in honour of Harriet's service to the nation. She was so poverty-stricken that she had to sell a cow to afford the train ticket to her own celebrations. At some point in the late 1890s, tired of the ongoing complications from her childhood head trauma, Harriet elected to undergo brain surgery. She received no anesthesia for the procedure and instead chose to bite down on a bullet, as she had seen Civil War soldiers do during amputations. In 1903, Harriet donated a portion of her land in Auburn to the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, on the condition that it be used to build a home for the elderly. The Harriet Tubman Home for the Aged was completed in 1908, and she attended the opening as guest of honour. By 1911, Harriet was so frail she had to be admitted there herself. She died in 1913 of pneumonia, surrounded by family and friends. Just before she died, she told her loved ones, "I go to prepare a place for you." Harriet Tubman suffered the pain and degradation of slavery, the fracturing of her family, relentless racial prejudice, little recognition for her military service, constant poverty, and a debilitating brain injury. Yet, she tirelessly endeavoured to improve the lives of as many people as she could. She risked her life and liberty to guide fugitives to safety and provided a safe haven to those seeking freedom. Harriet showed extraordinary strength of will, unyielding self-sacrifice, and utter devotion to her family. That is why she is one of our favourite Weird Wonderful women. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share and subscribe, and thanks for stopping by Weird Wonderful Women, the channel dedicated to all those weird and wonderful ladies who dared to be different.